Hey humans, how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. I'm going to read you something. It's an excerpt from a poem called Genius is Love. It's by Yashi Brown, who is my guest for this episode. You didn't want the world to see you as limited because they would see themselves the same. You wanted to reflect the atmosphere, the stratosphere and freedom, where our minds could go if we could just let it, galaxies creating more galaxies. You always knew this before scientists stamped their approval. If we could just fathom and ponder, if we could just let our inner child wander, you stayed here because you knew it was the one place full of honor. It was full of endless inspire. You wanted honest truth. So beautiful. I'm a big fan of poetry, so, it doesn't surprise me that her book of poetry inspired me so and excited me about speaking with her. Yashi, in her early 20s, was diagnosed as bipolar type 1, which in her words is, is pretty much as extreme as you can get. She talks all about it in this conversation, and she was very honest, very open about everything that she's been through. We talk about a lot of books and music and such. I put all that stuff on the links page on heyhumanpodcast.com, and I hope for every episode that you listen to, that you do a deep dive into the links page, because there's some really cool things that people reference, stuff that turns them on, books they love to read, music they like to listen to, movies they enjoy, or whatever. It's just neat to see what other people are into, at least as far as I'm concerned. It's cool. Social media stuff, you know how to find me at this point, probably if you've heard a few episodes. Hey Human Podcast on all the social medias. You can find me at Susan Ruthism on Twitter. If you'd like to help support Hey Human, go to heyhumanpodcast.com, and there's a Amazon affiliates portal at the top of the page. You click on that, you shop Amazon like you normally would, and it helps support Hey Human, as do many of the links on the links page. If you are intrigued by a book or some music that we talk about in one of the episodes, and you go to the links page and click on it, it's likely going to take you to Amazon and through the portal, and that helps support Hey Human as well. It doesn't cost anything extra for you or anything like that. It just, if you're aware of what the affiliate programs do, it just, every purchase, it gives back, a couple pennies toward whomever the affiliate is. So I appreciate that. If you're doing your shopping on Amazon, thank you for doing it through Hey Human Podcast. Okay, I think that's it. Oh, I don't want to forget the book, the tantric book that Barbara Krause wrote. I mentioned a couple episodes back that I was going to be doing a giveaway for the tantric book, Urban Tantra. And the person who is going to be receiving that book is Bethany. Congratulations, Bethany. I'm not sure if it's appropriate to say her last name on air, so I'm not going to. But Bethany, congrats, and I will be sending you the copy of the book. Thank you so much. Anyone wants to reach out to me, Susan at heyhumanpodcast.com, please do so. I'd love to hear from you. And as always, I want to thank you all for listening. And I appreciate the fact that you're spreading it around, letting people know about Hey Human. And please rate and review on iTunes. I really appreciate that too. Been getting some great reviews, and it's really helpful. And I think you can review pretty much on any podcast app that you use. So iTunes is just probably the biggest one that I'm aware of, but I know there's lots out there, lots of choices for you. So yeah, anyway, go out there and see yourself in someone, and see someone in yourself, and be a part of the human race. And I wish everybody well, and beauty and love and all the good stuff. We could use a whole lot of good stuff. So I hope the best for you. Thanks for listening, and here we go. Yashi Brown, welcome to Hey Human Podcast.
Hi.
It's a pleasure to have you.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So we have a mutual friend, John Velasco, and I've known John forever and ever. And he's a dear old friend. So it was very, well, not old. He'll be mad if I say that. A friend I've had for a very long time. Let's put it that way. And you work
friends
with,
are great.
Yes, and you work with John.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yes.
So you are a poet.
Yeah.
And you are also, you have bipolar disorder, is that correct? Is that schizophrenia? Is that
bipolar? Bipolar is its own spectrum,
okay.
But it's very close to, it looks very similar to schizophrenia if you have the severe form, which is type 1, which gets a lot of, the psychotic features, which has the psychosis elements of it, and then the mania. So sometimes it can look very much so like it's more in the schizophrenia spectrum, because the schizoaffective disorder does have an element of mania in it, which is part of the schizophrenia spectrum. So initially I was diagnosed when I was 24 with prodromal or schizoaffective disorder, but they still were kind of unsure. Then after several more hospitalizations and other critiques, it was pretty much severe bipolar type 1, still unsure, possibly. And in the end, I don't know, I guess still to this day, whatever anyone wants to, package it as is what it is. But I do know that officially getting a diagnosis or having a word attached to the horror that I was experiencing in my life was very much so helpful.
Yeah.
That was very helpful, because I didn't know that there was a context. I didn't know that there was a name for the stuff that was going on in my head and the things I was experiencing, which was very frightening, but very real. So a lot of people don't like the fact that we have all these names for things and all that, and I get that aspect. But then there's an aspect of it that's very helpful. It helps a person to not feel just like a complete alien, meaning they know they're not alone because there's a name for things. And then there's then that other aspect of, okay, these are conditions that we see on TV that are depicted extremely, in a very scary way. These are depictions, is that me? So you go through a whole converging diverse set of emotions, and it can be a very it is a very lonely place.
Yeah,
it is.
So
even if you have lots of support.
Take us back to sort of before that. You happy childhood, just running around, being a kid, not hearing voices, not feeling weird.
Never heard voices, by the way.
Oh, okay.
No. But it's very similar. It happens very often. Mine wasn't necessarily that, but continue. We'll get more into that stuff.
So, just living your life, and you grew up in California.
Yes.
Right? Yeah, and now, from my understanding with any kind of brain chemistry stuff, that sort of kicks in the early 20s. So you were on the timeline.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So
I was textbook.
Yeah. So before and then during, what was that process like of just everything was hunky-dory and then boom?
Boom, yeah. And it is kind of like that. Everything is normal. Then I had a life situation. It was a romantic interest situation that was the trigger. That was like an instigator. But what that was is that brought up a lot of other emotional struggles in my just own personal life.
What do you mean by the trigger?
It was my first kind of heartbreak situation with so that was a very strong emotion for the first time I was ever feeling, and that was when I was 19, 20. So in saying that, it was kind of a trigger that uprooted a lot of these apparently this condition I was already predisposed to, which is deeply affected by life triggers, or triggers that, negative triggers, obviously something that sets off that button that is in most of us have triggers of some sort.
Absolutely.
So that was kind of, I would say that was kind of that tipping that area, and then that situation created its own domino effect. And in the end, I had just went into a very deep depression, and it just continued to get worse. And I wasn't going outside really. In the end, I was just staying in my room. I was locking myself away.
Were people noticing that?
Not really. There's a way to do that and not folks to mask it.
Yeah. Like, I'm just going to go listen to some music or be a teenager or whatever.
Or, and you're already going out or, and I'd leave with my car and just go to the canyons and just drive around the canyons and, Topanga Canyon, Malibu, all the canyons along the, the LA coastline. And
would that help?
To some degree. I was just kind of getting away and trying to find, and a lot of times I think I was just wandering, trying to find something that I didn't know what I was trying to find. But it was all part of that isolation, which I work on the campaign to change direction. We could talk about that more a little later, but that's part of the 5 signs of emotional pain is isolation. That's a key sign for anybody who might be observing something different happening in a loved one. So, back to that time period, I was doing that. And then just to give you kind of like paint a picture, I was working at the time in my dad's office, so I had my own area. I was running the office, and I would go in the morning, turn on the computer, and I would stare at the screen until about 4 o'clock when it was time to leave.
Wow.
And not realize the amount of time that had passed. And maybe someone would come in and I would do some or whatever, and then I'd go back. So I was not, in the end, that's when the psychosis starts to take on. You don't realize that you're not present. And then when that starts to happen, your thoughts start to create stories and
bigger
to create bigger thoughts.
Yeah.
And I was fully now disconnected. So while I was in that state of what I've just described, someone could walk in the room, and then I was aware that somebody was in the room, and they might see what's going on, but then in the end they just go away to something, because usually I was kind of, again, I was in a separate part in my own space.
You looked busy or concentrating on something.
Or concentrating on something or whatever. Then over time it became very apparent by the work that was getting left undone, by the things that were not getting fulfilled, and people saw, wait. And then my dad, he was living in another state at the time, things started to all come full circle. Yeah. So
in the moments you weren't really aware. You knew something like, oh my God, the whole day is gone and where did it go? But all of us have those moments. So how did you start piecing it together?
I didn't.
Oh, you didn't? So
It took family.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It took outside people.
Okay.
To say something's wrong, and I didn't know that anything was. I knew I didn't feel normal. I knew something was off. But I had now spent so much time in sadness. By that time, I was about 23, 24.
Oh, my gosh.
And I had spent so many years just in depression and everything. It just got so progressively worse that I didn't realize how severe I was at in the end. And then when I started saying things that were obviously very delusional and clearly not something that I was, clearly not something that was truly happening.
Sort of the thing like people are after me type stuff, or is it?
It was a little paranoia. There was some of that as well, for sure that. But just all sorts of stories I was just, making up in my head. And I'll talk, I'm working on a memoir, and I'll talk, I go into deep on that with that. But that's the gist, just stories I was kind of just conceiving in my brain. And they kind of came together, and I had a really severe actual psychotic break when I was 24, and I left and I was on the street for a very little bit. When I say a little bit, like 24 hours, it was not very long, but I had left and was walking around in a mumbling state, very unaware, and the cops were able to get me back to my family that was local there in California, because at the time I had left Vegas, came to California, all in a state of disarray. Don't know how I made it on a plane and all that stuff.
I was going to say, it's fascinating that the brain can still function and get you places, even though it's in this sort of separated.
And it's a good book to read. I'm reading it right now. It's called The Power of Habit. It's one of the most amazing books, because that book will just put what you just said into context, how we can be in another state, and they've now done tests on people who are clearly not there, but because of habit, they do something perfectly. But they're still not in a normal functioning state where they can be fully left alone. And so it's hard for loved ones to be able to, well, they just did that and they do that every day, but why are they still, are they playing game? Are like, is this for real? Are they putting on a show? Like that book helps to really, it's really fascinating. But yes, it was habit. Habit tells you, okay, I'm going to get on a plane. I need my driver license and I need to pay for the ticket and I need to wait. So the habit of taking a flight got me through leaving Vegas to there. But then once I was there, I was again mumbling and walking around in a disarray and thinking thoughts that were clearly delusional. And then you go back to, okay, I have to get a cab. So you go back to the habit of what it means to get a cab. You know, there's you see what I mean?
Yeah,
it's really
totally
interesting.
And your mind has still maintained, like, you remember all the experience to this day.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Which is also fascinating. So it's like writing its own story and putting it away in this library that you can then go check out the book and be like, oh yeah, I remember that story.
Yeah, that's a lot, and that's where a lot of creativity comes from, because you pull from the experience, you're able to contextualize it, but then still emotionally, a lot of times even go back there. Which I do quite often. But when you are in that state, what I was going to say is you don't know that it's not real until the medicines kick in, when they give you the medicines and you come out and you start to realize everything that as real as right now, we're here doing this podcast. I just came up the steps. We just had coffee. As real as all as that is, that's exactly how real a delusion experience is when you're in psychosis. That's how real it is. It's actual really happening in your brain. That's how real it is.
Did you experience, so you didn't experience hallucination, you said, but you had just messaging. Right? You didn't see people that weren't there. Well, you know, are they there? Maybe they are. Sometimes I think about that.
Delusions. Sometimes it's hard for people to know what a delusion is. So delusion is you just did something, so when I walked in, there was those two people out front. So a delusion is those two people, they left when I left my house and they got here before me. And why were they there before I did? Because I saw, you see that where those were just two women with their baby who I have no idea who they are. They were just happened to be leaving the building the same time I did. But what you do is you kind of disassociate a little with delusion as well. And you connect things that are completely not connected. And that's because of, does that make sense?
Yes, totally.
And it's very real. So just that's just, I mean, that's a small example. But that's happening in so many different simultaneously in so many different ways in the moment.
What do you think about the idea that, and again, I've thought about this so often. I was walking around in LA a couple months back, and I passed a man. He looked homeless and disheveled and all that. He was behind a liquor store, and he was talking quite loudly to himself. Yeah. But with pauses, as if someone was answering.
Yeah. That's hearing voices.
Yeah, and I thought, gosh, it would be so fascinating. I wonder who he's talking to. And then I think, is it possible? We've only just barely scratched the surface of what our brain is capable of. And some of the most brilliant neuroscientists in the world are still like, I don't know, you know? So sometimes I think, well, maybe they aren't. Maybe there's some other, I'm going to go out on a limb there, but maybe there's some other realm or dimension or something where they're actually tapping in, and then is somebody on that side having the same experience and people think that they're
right.
Do you know what I mean? I think, and I know that's sort of sci-fi, but it's also like, well, who's to say? We're still cracking the surface on telepathy, on picking up on remote individuals' thoughts, remote feelings, auditory, all sorts of things. Yeah. So now those experiences people saying are the difference is, though, they're definitely in a mental state of, I don't know how to place it, not making, they're still, isn't the grounding of that part, obviously. Right.
So the aspect of what they're doing is still rooted in a place where they are not healthy mentally because of the other decisions. Sure. Obviously, because of the actual decisions that are being made. Right.
They're not aware that I am in my body, I am having a remote viewing experience. They are I'm not even in. Who knows where I am.
Right.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's just, these are things that's hard to explain for me, for others that are dealing with mental, health conditions. But I know for myself, when I was experiencing those thoughts and the mania and all of that, I was not feeling well inside. I was deeply unhappy.
Even in mania,
you can have irritable mania, which is still very much somatic, but it's an irritable, and it's agitated, manic-y kind of a thing. And then you can have that euphoric mania too. But even despite all of that, there were, at the end of the day, depressive bipolar disorder is really, it's just the depression part is the key thing. That's the part that gets people in the end. It's just really bottomless. It's intense.
Yeah.
It's super, 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 super intense. What goes up comes down. I mean, just that's extreme manic, high, euphoric, has that complete, it's a matter of time before it swings the other way, just as deep.
Did you turn, to anything to placate that, like alcohol or drugs, or were you?
Never did. And I am one of the rare cases in that situation, and a lot of it just has to go back to probably my upbringing, meaning I was just I was that kid that went by the books and was afraid to go to the party and have the drink if my mom said don't have a drink, or don't touch a drug. So I actually did listen.
Yeah, that's good. Because
so
that would have only made things
yeah.
more complicated.
So I really wasn't curious in that way. I never didn't have an addictive personality in that way.
That's good.
I was fortunate,
Yeah.
very, very fortunate, because that part saved me. But I did. I didn't have that challenge.
When the police found you and brought you to start the beginning of the help that you needed.
Yeah, that was the beginning part.
Were you fighting it at that time, or were you like, thank God, it's somewhere in you? Did you think?
I wasn't aware still what was happening. I was just like, okay, police are here. Okay, and then I slept. I remember going to sleep in the guest room at my grandmother's, and my mom was there, and people were. And I was just in my own believing this story that was going on in my brain as to why I was in LA and what my purpose was in being there, and Yeah. Yeah. It's really interesting. But what I can say is, once you come down and you're put on the medications that bring you back to, okay, today is January 29th. Right now it is about 11:45, and I am on Madison Avenue. Like, once you get back to the present right this second, it's just the realization of everything that you were thinking was not as you thought it was imagined. Then that's when you have so many of the self-identity, self-esteem, sadness. That's when a lot of that starts to kick in, because you feel like you can't trust your brain.
Yeah.
And that's a deep part.
Was there shame around that too?
Serious shame.
Yeah.
Serious
Had anyone else in your family had that kind of, so there was no marker, right, to place it against?
No, there wasn't.
Is it a genetic a lot of times?
Yeah, no. It does run in families. Bipolar does. Schizophrenia does, especially, as well. So I have certain family members. Actually, I have family members, cousins, in my dad's side. Different individuals who might have struggled with different types of conditions, and then certain members of my family have been open about depression and all that kind of thing.
Sure. So there's a little bit of an underlying current, for sure. Yeah. The brain is so fascinating.
It really is.
I mean...
And what you said about what our brains are capable of, no, that is very true.
Yeah.
I really, really do believe that. And the delusions and everything that I experienced, there are some aspects and moments that I will go down kicking and screaming said were in fact real and not delusional. And doctors will have their opinions or whatever,
but
that's their opinion.
Any of those, or
no, I'm not going to explain them now.
Okay, save them for the book. Okay.
And not just that. I mean, it gets really tedious into it. But I will I just will say that there's those aspects that are very real.
Yeah.
And emotionally charging. And this I will say, you tend to think a lot of yourself every time you go into a manic state. You think that you have special capabilities. That's part of being manic. You feel like you are specially sent to do certain things. There's aspects of all of that that you definitely come to realize, no, I am just like any other human being out here having challenges. But then you definitely feel more inclined to certain activities and certain modes of expression. I feel definitely come very much easier, because you're just naturally pulling from something that is you're just naturally pulling your creativity from something that's already quite bizarre. So it's not really that difficult to go outside of the box or to think something kind of a little more interesting. You understand what I'm saying? Because
some of our greatest creatives have had that. Right?
Because it's right there. Yeah. You've already
touching God in its own
You've
way.
already kind of gone there in such a crazy. And you don't trust your brain and all this. So now you're just writing everything. So those aspects of it, it's kind of a given. It's not saying anyone's got to more acts. All it's saying is our experiences in life are going to all, especially if you are a creative, it's all influencing your art. So whatever those bizarre experiences are, it's going to show itself in the work that you do. And I will say that some of those unique moments I have a lot of belief in that I experienced.
Yeah,
so.
I believe it too. Were you the same amount of creative pre having all this stuff happen versus now?
No.
And even now that you're on a medication, I assume they figured, because I imagine at the beginning, it takes a minute to figure out the right dosages and what kind of meds.
Years to figure that out.
That's a long time.
Off and on meds. I was your textbook person with bipolar, severe bipolar and mental health challenge who didn't take their medicine all the time. I was that person. And have so much compassion and empathy for that person, because I get it. If you're not on the right ones, then you can't function every day. You're functioning as an alien in your own body. So when someone's like, they didn't take their meds. Did you take your meds? Why aren't you taking your meds? Every time I hear someone say that, I get it, but at the same time, one can't judge. One has to understand that it would be great if more people just did, out on the outside, did some research to understand why if you're not on the right medications, it's hard to take a medication, because you don't feel normal. So as human beings, we naturally gravitate to what helps us feel like a normal person on the inside. So there's so many instances where I'm like, if you want to take my meds, then if you take my meds and then you tell me why I'm not taking my meds, why don't you go take my meds and tell me what happens? Come back to me in 2 days.
Yeah.
Like it's so easy to point a finger.
Sure.
It's
anything,
so
really.
in anything.
Yeah.
In anything. It's so easy to point a finger.
Yeah.
And when a person is controlled and taking their meds, it is easier to be around them than when they're not. I get all of it. I was in the end, my last episode was so intense and severe. My hopelessness, my depression, I was not going to make it. I was going to end it all. And I just surrendered to just prayer, universe, and found the right doctor and was like on my knees begging for meds that would work. And I got just that. And that was in September of 2008. And my doctor just, what I'd say was 5 times more attentive than the doctors I had prior. It's some of the most expensive doctors I had prior. This doctor, she was just a local doctor that also has a practice in the county clinic as well, and works at a county clinic in addition to her own practice, and just was amazing and put me on the meds that I'm on today. And yes, so I am 1,000% believer in medication, and I am a complete creative. So I just like people to know that you can be creative on medicine, and when you're on the right medicine, you're more creative. Because the challenge with bipolar and schizophrenia and some of these mental health challenges is that you could be creative all you want, but if you can't channel it and if you can't direct it properly or complete things and all of the above, then you're not able to really connect with the rest of the world in the way that you would want to. Now, some can't. Some get through and are able to. Some posthumously, is that how I say?
Posthumous,
yeah.
It's a weird word.
Yeah, I don't know how to say it.
I'm still working on trying to say Schenectady before I get there today. So
yeah.
There are just weird words in the universe.
Yeah. So yeah, there's still, but for the most part, so I'm a huge believer in it. Do I think it's the fit for every single individual? No, everyone has to find their own way. Our society is changing as far as what we think the mind is capable of. We're becoming much more accepting of different types of spiritual beliefs, of different types of gifts, quote unquote, certain people might have out there, and understanding, I think, so as time goes on and as we accept ourselves for who we are in whatever peculiarities there are, I think these challenges are going to have better context and be able to be dealt with in a way, where individuals are not afraid to say something wrong is happening to me, so I need help, or a family, a father or mother is okay with talking about it. All of the cultural aspects are also holding back the actual progression of how we're moving forward in these same mental health conditions.
The united shame over mental illness is extraordinary.
Extraordinary.
Yeah. But
Still.
I feel like it's ebbing ever better. Tiny, but there's a show on, I think it's on Amazon Prime, it's David Eagleman's The Brain, and they did research. Yeah, it's fine. They did research. They hooked people up to electrodes on the brain, and they had them look at images of just regular people, dogs, whatever, and the brain lit up like, oh, dogs, humans, this, that, or the other, everything's groovy. And then they showed them, for example, a picture of somebody who was homeless, and the brain suddenly went to the part of the brain that looks at objects instead of humans. And that's that empathy thing. It's like they disassociate. And I think as human beings, we have a tough time empathizing with something that we might fear could be in ourselves. So
so interesting what you just said. How was when it came to the he's a
neuroscientist, David Eagleman.
How in the work that he does, it presented itself as an object.
Yes.
And that's kind of what I was trying to get through when I was doing my piece on last Wednesday, because it's easier for us to handle looking at it if we contextualize it that way. I don't think we're meaning, all of us as humans are saying that's just an object, but in order for us to be able to harness looking, getting by, or having to be in the presence of someone homeless for whatever length of time, we have to be robotic. Otherwise, how do we deal with that?
Yeah, not only that, in the research, it looked like it happened instantaneously. So it's not even on a conscious level. So consciously, we look at things as other. Yeah. And the brain goes, oh, let's put this over here. It'll make you feel better.
Yeah.
So fascinating. It's not very helpful, but it's certainly fascinating.
It is fascinating. And all that means you said something. It happens subconsciously. So it's just going to take a change in consciousness.
Yes. For
us, once we evolve more consciously to understand, we're still dealing with everyday life in such a physical way. We're still looking at everyone in such a, the physicality of things, the physicality of the aesthetics of things. We're still very caught up in that.
Yeah.
So once we really become more, and I mean, there's a place for that, obviously, there's that place, but once we become more caught up in each other's spirit, it's going to change until we start really seeing individuals as spirits walking along, beings and spirits and lights and things like that, instead of, that man over there who has those Asian features, or that woman, she's kind of, she's darker skinned black woman. Until we start to really not even really, we see more the spirits of each individual, then I think that we'll be able to do a little better.
I hope that's in our lifetime.
Maybe not.
But
I do hope so too.
But I hope. I pray for that.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
It truly would be. Yes.
Yeah, it is. And I don't know if we'll be aware. Maybe we will.
Maybe.
Who knows?
Maybe. Yeah. I can only hope. You mentioned people who are on the medication. Okay, so we're in the music industry as well. Like, we're in all these industries of creatives. Many of my musician friends were like, "Oh, I can't write a song unless I'm high or drunk or whatever." And I'm like, have you tried not being that and see? You can convince yourself of anything. You can convince yourself that anything you give power to. If I'm afraid and I give power to that fear becomes my master. If I am joyful and I put my energy into joy becomes my, you know what I mean? Like, so I think that is so important, because people won't take their medications for that very reason. I think they're afraid that it will put a stop on the source. So you're living proof that it doesn't have to be that way.
If you're on the right ones. If you're on the wrong one, absolutely. Most of the meds out there, and a lot of the medications out there, will have that effect that flattens, which takes away human emotion, really.
But you were brave enough to say, this isn't right, and keep trying. And that's the other thing. It's like therapy. It's like finding a good doctor or a good pediatrician or a good school or whatever it is. It's interesting that we give this power to people who seem like they're supposed to know everything. Mm-hmm. But as my father always says, there are still people that graduate med school with C-.
I always think of that. Always.
So
always.
It's okay to say, this isn't a good fit. This isn't okay, and something is not right, and keep going until it is right.
Yeah.
With lovers, with friends, with whatever it is.
No, it's true.
Yeah.
It's true to believe that there's something better that's out there.
Yeah.
But it's hard to, when you're put in you need others to communicate and help you see that, because you feel like, okay, this is my only experience, so it doesn't work. But no, there are different types of doctors. There's different types of medicines, and not every medicine is a fit. The key thing, you could be on the right medicine, just the wrong dose. It could be that simple. It could be just a matter of tapering off this one dose of this med, but then doing this med. It could be so simple. You could just be a heartbeat away from functioning at your best. If I was to take another medicine one particular way, I'd be completely functioning, so differently, not as good. So,
and it took you years, it sounds like, to find that, right?
Yeah, I was initially diagnosed when I was 24, but I had serious symptoms at 19, 20. It's just we didn't know what it was. But so if we take it from the actual date, though, that I had been diagnosed and started to become under different doctors' care, up until when I did get the right meds, it was about 7 to 8 years
so long
in between. Time. Off and on, moments that I didn't have bad symptoms, then serious manic episodes and hospitalizations. And then when I got on the right meds, I always say I felt better in 6 to 8 weeks than I had in 10 years. It just took the right combination. And my doctor, she was the one that listened constantly to my feedback, wanted me to, every single time I saw her, what happened this last week? How are your meds work? Okay, so what did you do? Like, she asked so many questions. Yeah, she asked so many questions about my mood, behavior, and then she says, so were you taking your meds? I said, well, I did miss this day, but she says, I can't help you unless you take your meds every day. That's how we can find out what's working and not working. But if you don't take your meds, I won't know. She gave me, and it made just so much sense in that moment that I just said, okay.
That empowers you. She's empowered you to be a voice for yourself. By saying, look, this seems, yeah. That's great.
Instead of saying, you need to take your meds, no, everybody says you need to take your meds. Everyone's like, why aren't you on your meds? But she's saying, we can't get this right. There is a way to get this right, but we can't get this right without you doing this part, because I'm not going to be seeing the results of my work.
Right.
That's different.
Yeah.
That's different.
That's communion.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's working with someone.
Yeah.
And that's validating that person's part as well in it.
Yeah.
Oh, it really
That's
did
a good
make
doctor.
it
Good on her.
good.
And,
really
good on you for sticking with it and having.
Yeah. No, for sure.
There's bravery there.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. So, one of, I would say, a poetry collection that you're well known for, famous for, is the Black Daisy in a White Limousine.
Yeah.
That is such a cool title, by the way.
Thank you.
As a songwriter, I was like, that is the coolest title ever. So, and I was like, I'm going to go buy the book and read it. And it's like $1 billion on eBay. But
it's on eBay now?
People are like, I have a copy of this. It's, $600. I'm like, well, that's a little steep for me. But it's sold out on Amazon and things.
Yeah, it's not out and it's not in print anymore. I'm redoing another.
People are selling it for a lot of money.
That is really, I know, I saw that one day and I'm like, I'm not even, no, I'm kidding. I was like,
kick that back. Yeah.
No, I mean, that's great, but there isn't any copies out there. I kind of, and I'm working on...
was that your first collection?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the first. I have another set of poems that I've done since then, but because I'm working on my album, my poetry album, which is going to be that compilation with music, and I am so excited about my project right now. And so we're holding off on the new audiobook release for Black Daisy and some of the other stuff so that I can just do a launch that has that aspect, that has the audiobook, the updated audiobook, but the music project. So there's that.
Okay, cool.
And then it'll be a simultaneous release, hopefully. But
how has everything been informing your poetry and your, how does that inform it? Where do you pull? Do you have to go to some of the dark places, but now you have an ability to come back, whereas you're not just hanging out in the...
Well, as a writer, I have always, even when I was in the severe funk, those moments, I have to say there's always been a trail of hope in my work, usually. I never not had that moment. There, in the very beginning of my depressions, when I couldn't conceive a light at the end of the tunnel, there were pieces that didn't have that piece of hope in it. But for the most part, I've always written in that way. So I would go back to those periods, or I'd be in those periods, but I'd always dream of victory, always dream of coming out on top. And it's that dream of getting through it that has kept me determined in not only my recovery and my treatments, and not giving up on my dreams as far as my career is concerned, despite days of feeling like this isn't gonna, I don't know if this is gonna continue. So that hope has kind of always been part of me. There's a part of me that's just so optimistic and refuses to stay negative, despite whatever is going on around me. So that's been a lifesaver for sure.
And John sent me some of your work as well, and there seemed a current of requesting for understanding too, that reaching out to your fellow person saying, I'm a human being and these are the things that are going on with me, but it doesn't mean that I'm not worthy of your love and respect. And that was a really beautiful kind of undercurrent happening as well.
Oh, interesting.
As you're saying, this is who I am and these are the things I feel, and it's very passionate work, very powerful. Your voice is strong, but there's this sort of also this underlay, at least for me, also hear my little voice, the one saying I am lovable still, and understand me and feel me, and which is cool. I think it's neat to have that juxtaposition of the really strong roar and this gentle sweetness that kind of
I think that's the honesty. I try to be transparent. I believe us individuals that can have a very forceful and strong side, that sometimes for some of us that's the only side people see, have literally the most delicate, gentle emotions of everybody. Usually those are the ones that have that. So just as a writer, I'm not afraid to show that part as well. But I think that's by default. Those strong personalities all have that. It's just I'm just that daredevil, and when I write, I show that other side.
So why is the limousine white? I'm curious.
when that line came in my head, it literally just popped into my brain. Mm-hmm. And that's a really good question. I think it represented a I think it represented a divine, like something of real specialness, of real so it just a place where someone would want to be. I don't know, I really have to.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. I'm stuttering around it because there's a lot of different things that were happening in that time too. But I think ultimately, it just represented this this place that I don't want to say it was a place of refuge, because Limousine is not necessarily a place of refuge. So I don't want to say that, but it did exemplify something that felt special and that felt like you've arrived. Mm-hmm. Whether it's in romance, whether it's in because it was first written as a romance, as a love line. Mm-hmm. So to a song my sister and I were trying to write, and so we were trying her husband we were working with at the time, who's a musician and musical director, was playing this track, and I was in the kitchen sitting on the counter, and words are just things that people say, you write, and I'm like, I allow words. I don't really write words, I allow them. So again, it was one of those things, and the line came in all at once. When I saw you, it was like a dream. I was a black daisy in a white limousine. And I said, hey, I have a line for this. And so that was the way the track started. Yeah. And so we built the song around it. And the line never stopped. It continued to evolve for me. And then I continued to write poems, and I continued to just identify so much with it.
Yeah, it's really a cool line.
Thank you.
I dig it.
Thank you.
I love words so much. So
you do?
Oh gosh, yeah.
I love not only being around, but just talking to people who enjoy words, because it's a special soul that enjoys words to that degree, that appreciates words. It's a sensitive soul.
Yeah. It's nothing like taking a pile of words and stringing them together, or hearing a lyrical. Yeah, I just love it. Absolutely.
I'm listening to this artist right now, and I'll give you his information if you want. His name is Sampha. Okay. You might be aware of his work. He did something. I think he had done something with Kanye. I can't remember. Okay. But I've been playing his songs so much recently. But he has this lyric. He says, "You have me swimming in those eyes. You make it rain like you own the sky." And I just keep, and the way the song goes, though, is really just, the song is so cool. Yeah. But just some of the line, and I just love that feeling of, I love the way he said and sang that. That's just special.
I mean, words are magical. They take you on journeys and books are friends. I mean, there's so much, and poetry is divine, and it's lovely. I'm so glad it exists in the world.
I know. And when you hear, it's true though, when you hear the poems, like I hear contemporary poetry, and some of it, I mean, it's so amazing. But then I feel like, why is it when I listen to Donne, or when I read Donne, or when I read Blake, or when I read some of or words, Wordsworth, why are they so magical? Mm-hmm. Like that, there's just something, those poets. And
Blake was touching God, I think.
Oh, constantly.
Yeah.
Constantly.
Yeah.
What is it that, I'm just so in awe. Yeah. Though, of our, and other writers, Langston Hughes and some of that.
Oh, yeah.
You think about it, so the poetry.
James Baldwin.
Yeah.
Talk about a freight train. I mean, just boom. So good.
Isn't it something, though?
So
it really
good.
Something. When you read their works, when you read these works, you're like, this is God talking. This is something, because you have all sorts of types of writings out there, and it's all amazing stuff. But then some of those poets, it's like, wow.
Yeah.
That brain.
I know it. It's so wonderful. It's so wonderful. I want to get back to it because you had said you wanted to talk about it in the very beginning when we were talking. You said it was one of 5 signs of something, and you said we'll talk about it later.
So I'm working on the campaign Change Direction, which is spearheaded by the amazing Barbara Van Dalen, who I say amazing because she really just is an amazing soul, and she's one of my dearest friends. And she is an award-winning clinical psychologist, but she was also acknowledged by Time Magazine in 2012 for, being one of the influential individuals of the year. And she just has the ability to bring strong voices together, but launched this campaign in 2015 and was able to get some really strong voices to rally around it as well, talking about the 5 signs of emotional pain and the campaign to change direction. And slowly but surely it's gotten more and more momentum out there. But I just connected because the 5 signs, she says that we should all know the 5 signs, which will help intervention with suicide, which will help an intervention with someone who might be given to going to drugs or alcohol or any of these things. And the 5 signs are very consistent. Just like we know the 5 signs of a heart attack, or just like we might have to understand and know how to do CPR, we should know what the 5 signs of emotional pain are. And it was the first of its kind that I ever heard anything like that. And I looked at the 5 signs, and I had every last one of those at this simultaneously. And the way it works is that if you have 2 or at least 3 or 2 at the same time, but I had all of them, all the signs. And if someone was aware or in tune with these signs or emotions, then they would have caught on well before. Like, I started having my signs at 19, but it didn't catch on until I really went at 24, kind of went there. So those signs are isolation, hopelessness, irritability, personality change, and then not keeping up with your appearance or yourself.
Oh, interesting. That makes sense, though.
So if you see those, it is usually they're all happening together. That's how you know someone needs some serious emotional attention. Wow. And it just resonated so much. I reached out, we met, and ever since then, I've been just consulting with her on the campaign. We've just come up with different ideas and reach out and do different. I've done a few different events, with her and everything. So we're working on a major event that's happening in June. That'll be in London, and it will be it's another summit. It's a world summit that she's doing.
Yeah, that's cool.
Bringing other foundations
I'll put links
together.
to all of that on heyhumanpodcast.com too,
so definitely put links for the campaign, the 5 signs, and everybody should know what these signs are. It should be ingrained. We should.
These are the things I wish they taught in junior high or high school. I don't,
actually,
it would be
kindergarten.
Super helpful.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, that's what's happening soon. Eventually, every state, but California, certain states and cities are making pledges to adopt the 5 signs because it literally from grade school, they're very easy to learn.
Sure.
And a kid that's 7, 8 years old can see, Mommy, you're showing the signs. What's going on?
Yeah.
That's how it all works. Is everybody helping each other.
Sure.
But kids are some of the most. If they grow up learning what these things and everything, it's not a big deal to talk about emotions. It's not a big deal to say I'm feeling sad today.
If only we all were more in tune with that. And unfortunately, now we're in this place where we're desensitizing our emotions to such an extreme by, our machines that certainly help our lives function quicker. I don't know, better is not really the word, is it? It's quicker, more conveniently and all that, but it's robbing us of that connection, that communion, and that moment where I say, I see you. Do you see me? We don't really have that in a lot of ways because we can digitally communicate.
Right.
And, and now people are scared to answer their door or, answer their phone even.
Or respond to a text or respond to anything because it means confronting or whatever. I mean, I don't know. I think that's been an issue all the time with people, but I hear you. It's so easy today to turn off and to not deal with something or to mask.
And
or hide behind and isolate.
Yeah.
It is very easy to do that.
Yeah.
And it's easy to do that and someone not take it seriously and just be, they're online. Or they're just, now it's even easier.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah. It's fascinating. What's next? What's coming next? You're working on the album of
Yes.
poetry and music combined, and then it sounds like you've got a book working on that.
So that so the book is pretty much finished. I have an
Okay.
audiobook that's pretty much finished to the
Okay.
new set of poems for Black Daisy.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have that's when I'm going to California this week to finish up writing some of the songs, and I'm working on the Change Direction poem, which is another it's going to be a spoken word poem that I did with individuals that submitted lines, and so I put it into a big piece. It's a
Cool.
group poem, so I'm working on that group poem. And then we're also filming, and that's what I'm working with John, is they're filming kind of all of these different aspects related to the work that I'm doing, but also this topic of mental health for their series that they're putting together called Creative Activists. So so my part is going to be one of the episodes on that. So that's
awesome.
what they're working on. Yeah. So
And your
those two
memoir.
things.
as well.
And that's in the that's been absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm a busy girl.
It's exciting.
Oh, it is. As well as speaking engagements, I have some stuff coming up. There's the Blogger Summit. I don't know. Have you know what Blogger is? Oh, okay. Well, Blogger Conference.
Okay.
They have the Blogger Health or Blogger whatever. So
Okay.
that's coming up on Wednesday. It's in Tribeca.
Okay.
So that's cool. And Ariana Huffington's going to do the keynote for that particular event, and they're talking about everything relating to health and women. So that's some of the so from mental health to fitness health to image issues, self-image issues, all sorts of different things. So it's going to be an amazing it's going to be an amazing thing they're doing. I think.
Cool. Does that happen once a year, or does it come up every quarter?
It's once a year.
Okay.
The Blogger Conference. It's been pretty well known, but this is their health part did so well. They just did this one for Blogger Health, and
cool.
it just that was exciting.
That's great. There's lots going on.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you being on the show. How can people find you? What's the best way?
Oh, you can go to my website, yashibrown.com. I'm trying to be a little bit more diligent and consistent with my social media, Facebook and Twitter, but you'll see me on there more often. I'm very much so back and getting regular. That's the part of me that retreats, and then it's very difficult for me to hand it off to somebody.
Oh, yeah.
I micromanage. So
That
doesn't really help me. That's not, I know. So that doesn't really help the whole thing either. I mean, if you're not going to do it, then have someone else help. Well, you can't micromanage. So.
Yeah.
So I'm still finding my way with social media.
Okay. Thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
It's been delightful. Bye, everybody.
Bye.